There are moments in history when everything hangs by a thread. When 1 second decides the fate of millions. When a distance of 2 meters determines whether the war ends today or continues for another year, taking millions more lives. July 20th, 1944 was such a day. On this day, a group of German officers decided to do the impossible. Kill Adolf Hitler. This wasn't the first attempt, not the second. This was the 42nd attempt to assassinate the Führer. But this one came closer than any other. So close that the explosion threw Hitler across the room. So close that his hair caught fire. So close that for a few hours, the conspirators thought they had succeeded. But they hadn't. And because of that failure, because of 2 meters, because of a wooden table leg, because of pure, insane luck, 5,000 people would be executed. The war would continue for 9 more months, and millions more would die. This is the story of Operation Valkyrie, the story of how the world almost changed, and why it didn't. His name was Claus von Stauffenberg. On the surface, he was exactly what the Nazi regime wanted. A German aristocrat, tall, handsome, a decorated war hero. But inside, he was something far more dangerous. A man who had seen the truth. Born in 1907 to an old Bavarian noble family, Stauffenberg grew up believing in duty, honor, tradition, the old German values. When Hitler came to power, Stauffenberg, like many officers, initially supported him. Germany was rising from the ashes of World War I. The economy was recovering. The military was rebuilding. It seemed like a new dawn. But then came the war. Stauffenberg fought in Poland in 1939. He fought in France in 1940. He fought in the Soviet Union in 1941. And with each campaign, he saw things that shook him to his core. Mass executions of Jews. Entire villages burned. Civilians gunned down in ditches. This wasn't war. This was extermination. He began to question, quietly, carefully. But questioning wasn't enough. In April 1943, Stauffenberg was stationed in Tunisia, North Africa. His unit was driving along a desert road when Allied fighters appeared overhead. Strafing run. Machine gun fire tore through his vehicle. Stauffenberg was hit multiple times. His left eye was destroyed. His right hand was blown off. His left hand lost 2 fingers. He nearly died. For weeks he lay in a hospital bed, drifting in and out of consciousness. His body a wreck of bandages and pain. Most men would have been broken. Stauffenberg came out harder. One day, recovering in the hospital, he said to his wife, "I feel I must do something now to save Germany. We officers must accept our share of responsibility." He had 1 eye, 3 fingers on 1 hand, no right hand at all. But he had something more important, conviction. And he wasn't alone. Across Germany, a network of conspirators was forming. Generals, colonels, politicians, civilians. They called themselves the German Resistance. Some had been plotting against Hitler since the 1930s. Some joined after Stalingrad. Some after they learned about the Holocaust. But they all agreed on one thing. Hitler had to die. There had been attempts before. So many attempts. In 1938, a group of generals planned a coup. But Hitler's diplomatic success at Munich made them back down. In 1939, a carpenter named Georg Elser planted a bomb in a Munich beer hall where Hitler was giving a speech. The bomb was perfect. The timer was perfect. Hitler left 13 minutes early. The bomb exploded. 8 people died. Hitler wasn't one of them. In 1943, officers smuggled a bomb onto Hitler's plane, disguised as a bottle of liquor. The bomb didn't detonate. The cold temperature at high altitude froze the detonator. Another attempt. An officer volunteered to blow himself up in Hitler's presence, wearing a bomb in his coat. At the last second, Hitler cancelled the meeting. Every time, something went wrong. Hitler seemed untouchable, protected by fate, by the devil, by something. But Stauffenberg believed he could succeed where others had failed. Not because he was smarter, not because he was braver, but because he had access. In June 1944, Stauffenberg was promoted to Chief of Staff of the Reserve Army. This position gave him something priceless. Regular meetings with Hitler. He could get into the room, and that's all he needed. The plan was called Operation Valkyrie. Originally, Valkyrie was a legitimate Nazi contingency plan. In case of internal unrest or a revolt by the millions of slave laborers in Germany, The reserve army would take control of key government buildings, communication centers, and SS headquarters to restore order. The conspirators realized they could use this plan to stage a coup. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Step 1. Kill Hitler with a bomb. Step 2. Immediately activate Operation Valkyrie, claiming that rogue SS elements had assassinated the Führer and were attempting a coup. Step 3. The reserve army would arrest the SS, take control of Berlin, and establish a new government. Step 4. Negotiate peace with the Allies. It had to be fast, precise, simultaneous. Kill Hitler, then seize power in the chaos before anyone realized what was happening. But there was one massive problem. Hitler was nearly impossible to kill. He rarely followed a predictable schedule. He changed plans constantly. He was surrounded by layers of security: SS bodyguards, Gestapo, military police. His headquarters, the Wolfschanze, the Wolf's Lair, was a fortress buried in the forests of East Prussia. Minefields, checkpoints, bunkers. Getting in was hard, getting out alive after setting off a bomb, nearly impossible. But Stauffenberg had no choice. It had to be him. July 1944, the war was turning against Germany. The Soviets were smashing through the Eastern Front. The Western Allies had landed in Normandy a month earlier. Germany was losing. But Hitler refused to consider surrender. He ranted about miracle weapons and final victory. Every day the war continued, more people died: soldiers, civilians, Jews in the death camps. The conspirators knew, if they didn't act now, it would be too late. Stauffenberg was summoned to the Wolf's Lair for a conference on July 11. He brought the bomb, but at the last second, Himmler and Göring, two other top Nazis, weren't present. The conspirators wanted to kill all three at once. Stauffenberg aborted. He left the bomb in his briefcase. Another attempt on July 15. Same thing. The conditions weren't perfect. Abort. Every failed attempt increased the risk of discovery. The Gestapo was everywhere. One whisper, one suspicious glance, one intercepted message, and they'd all be dead. But Stauffenberg didn't stop. July 20th, 1944, the final attempt. At 7 a.m., Stauffenberg and his aide, Lieutenant Werner von Haften, boarded a plane from Berlin to Rastenburg, East Prussia. In Stauffenberg's briefcase, 2 bombs. British-made plastic explosives. Silent. Deadly. Each bomb weighed about 1 kilogram. Together, they would be enough to kill everyone in a conference room. The flight took 3 hours. Stauffenberg sat silently, staring out the window. He knew this was likely a one-way trip. If the bomb worked, he'd be executed for treason, either by the Nazis if caught, or possibly by the Allies after the war. If it didn't work, he'd be tortured to death by the Gestapo. There was no scenario where he survived unscathed, but he didn't care anymore. Some things are worth dying for. At 10:15 a.m., the plane landed at Rastenburg airfield. A car drove Stauffenberg and Haften through multiple checkpoints, past guard towers, past minefields, into the heart of the Wolf's Lair. The conference was scheduled for 12:30 p.m. Stauffenberg had 2 hours. The Wolf's Lair was not one building. It was a complex, a small city hidden in the forest. Bunkers, barracks, guard posts, all concealed under camouflage netting. Hitler spent most of his time in the Führerbunker, a massive concrete structure, reinforced, nearly bomb-proof. If Stauffenberg had to detonate the bomb there, the explosion would be contained. Hitler might survive, but fate, cruel, insane fate, intervened. That morning was unusually hot. The conference room in the bunker was stifling. An officer suggested moving the meeting to the Lagerbaracke, a wooden briefing hut above ground. Better ventilation, cooler. Hitler agreed. The conspirators would later realize this decision doomed them. In a concrete bunker, the explosion would compress inward, multiplying its force. Everyone inside would die. In a wooden building with windows, the blast would blow outward. The pressure would dissipate, but Stauffenberg didn't know this yet. At 12 p.m., he excused himself. He needed to freshen up. He went to a private room with Haften. They opened the briefcase. Inside, 2 bombs wrapped in shirts. The detonator was a simple chemical fuse. Crush a glass vial with pliers. Acid eats through a wire. In 10 minutes, boom. Stauffenberg had 3 fingers on his left hand. No right hand. He struggled with the pliers. Haften helped him. They activated the first bomb. 10 minutes. Stauffenberg started to activate the second bomb. A knock on the door. Herr Oberst, the meeting is starting. The Führer is waiting. No time. They wrapped the first bomb in a shirt, placed it in the briefcase. The second bomb, unactivated, they left behind. This would be the first fatal mistake. 2 bombs would have ensured Hitler's death. 1 bomb might not. But there was no time to argue. No time to think. Stauffenberg grabbed the briefcase and walked out. 12:30 p.m. He entered the conference room. It was crowded. About 24 officers and staff gathered around a large, heavy oak table. Maps spread across the table. Situation reports from the Eastern Front. Hitler stood near the center, leaning over the maps, listening to General Heusinger's briefing about the Soviet advance. Stauffenberg entered, nodded respectfully, and moved toward the table. He placed his briefcase on the floor, directly under the table. Right next to Hitler, less than 2 meters away. He positioned it carefully. Then he muttered something about a phone call and slipped out of the room. 12:35 p.m. Stauffenberg walked quickly but calmly across the compound. He met Haften at the car. They got in. Drive, now. 12:37 p.m. The car approached the first checkpoint. The guard raised his hand. Halt! Stauffenberg leaned out. I have an urgent call to Berlin. Let me through. The guard hesitated. Stauffenberg's rank, his decorations, his missing eye and hand, clearly a war hero. The guard saluted. The gate opened. They drove through. 1 checkpoint down. 2 more to go. 12:40 p.m. Inside the conference room, Colonel Heinz Brandt, standing next to Hitler, found the briefcase on the floor. It was in his way. He bent down, picked it up and moved it to the other side of the thick oak table leg. This was the second fatal mistake. That table leg, solid, heavy oak about 10 centimeters thick, was now between the bomb and Hitler. 12:42 p.m. The bomb exploded. The blast was enormous. The wooden building shattered. Walls blew outward. The roof lifted and crashed down. Windows exploded into thousands of shards. A fireball erupted from the center of the room. The sound echoed across the entire compound. Soldiers hundreds of meters away hit the ground, thinking it was an air raid. Inside the room, chaos. 4 men died instantly or within minutes. The stenographer, 2 officers, and Colonel Brandt, the man who moved the briefcase. Brandt's legs were blown off. He would die later that day. Everyone else was injured. Burns, shrapnel, ruptured eardrums, papers were on fire. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burnt wood and flesh. Men stumbled out of the wreckage, bleeding, dazed, screaming. And in the center of the destruction, covered in soot, his hair singed, his trousers shredded, Adolf Hitler stood up. He was alive. The table leg had shielded him. The blast had blown outward through the windows instead of compressing inward. His right arm was bruised and temporarily paralyzed. His eardrums were damaged. His legs were peppered with wooden splinters. But he was alive. He staggered out of the ruined building, supported by aides, his face black with soot, his eyes wild. One of the first things he said, "Someone tried to kill me." Meanwhile, 2 kilometers away, Stauffenberg and Haften were at the second checkpoint. They heard the explosion. A massive boom echoed through the forest. Stauffenberg smiled. It's done. They bluffed their way through the second checkpoint. Then the third. By 12:50 p.m., they were outside the Wolf's Lair perimeter. Stauffenberg was certain. No one could have survived that blast. Hitler was dead. At 1 p.m., they reached the airfield. At 1:15 p.m., their plane took off, heading back to Berlin. During the flight, Stauffenberg looked out the window, calm for the first time in months. The tyrant was dead. The coup was in motion. Germany would be free, except Hitler wasn't dead. 10 p.m., Berlin, Reserve Army Headquarters, Bendlerblock. The conspirators waited. General Friedrich Olbricht, General Ludwig Beck, dozens of officers. They had received word. The bomb had exploded. But no confirmation that Hitler was dead. They hesitated. If Hitler was alive, activating Valkyrie would be suicide. They needed confirmation. But communication from the Wolf's Lair was chaotic, contradictory. Some reports said Hitler was dead. Others said he was injured. Others said nothing. They waited. This hesitation would kill them. At 3:00 p.m., Stauffenberg's plane landed in Berlin. He immediately called Bendlerblock. "Hitler is dead. Start Valkyrie, now." But 2.5 hours had passed since the explosion. 2.5 hours of paralysis, of waiting. By now, the Wolf's Lair had confirmed. Hitler was alive, and he was furious. At 3:30 p.m., the conspirators finally activated Operation Valkyrie. Orders went out to reserve army units across Germany. The Führer is dead. SS elements are attempting a coup. Arrest all SS and Gestapo officers. Secure government buildings. In some cities, it worked. In Paris, the military governor arrested 1,200 SS officers. In Vienna, soldiers surrounded Nazi party headquarters. For a few hours, the coup seemed to be succeeding. But in Berlin, the center of power, everything fell apart. At the Reich Main Security Office, an officer received the Valkyrie orders. He called the Wolf's Lair directly. "Is the Führer alive?" "Yes, the Führer is alive and will address the nation tonight." The officer hung up. He ignored the Valkyrie orders. Other commanders did the same. They called, they checked, and when they learned Hitler was alive, they refused to act. The coup collapsed in real time. At 4:00 p.m., Hitler made a phone call to Joseph Goebbels in Berlin. His voice was hoarse, his hearing damaged, but he was unmistakably alive. Goebbels immediately began calling commanders, confirming Hitler lived. By 5:00 p.m., the conspiracy was exposed. At 6:00 p.m., loyal Nazi officers stormed the Bendler block. Gunfire erupted in the hallways. Stauffenberg, Albrecht, and the other conspirators barricaded themselves in an office. They had pistols. The attackers had submachine guns. It was over. At 7:00 p.m., the door burst open. Stauffenberg raised his pistol. He was shot in the shoulder. They dragged him and the other leaders into a courtyard. General Friedrich Fromm, who had secretly known about the plot but hadn't participated, now needed to cover his tracks. He ordered an immediate execution. No trial, no time, just bullets. At 12:30 a.m., midnight, July 21st, 1944, Stauffenberg and 4 other conspirators were taken to the courtyard. A single spotlight illuminated them. A firing squad of 10 soldiers stood ready. One by one, they were shot. When it was Stauffenberg's turn, he stood straight, despite his wounds. His last words, "Long live sacred Germany." The rifles fired. Stauffenberg collapsed. His body, along with the others, was buried in a shallow grave. The next day, on Hitler's orders, the bodies were exhumed, burned, and the ashes scattered. No grave, no memorial, nothing. But the purge had only begun. Hitler survived, and he was enraged. This wasn't just an assassination attempt. This was betrayal by his own officers, the men he trusted. He wanted revenge, total, absolute. Over the next months, the Gestapo arrested everyone even remotely connected to the conspiracy. They tortured confessions out of prisoners. Each name led to 10 more names. The purge spread like a plague. General Erwin Rommel, Germany's most famous general, was implicated. He hadn't been directly involved, but he'd known about the plot. Hitler gave him a choice: public trial and execution, with his family arrested and disgraced, or suicide, with his family left unharmed and his reputation intact. On October 14, 1944, Rommel took poison. The Nazis called it a heart attack. In total, nearly 5,000 people were executed in connection with the July 20th plot. Hung on meat hooks with piano wire. Filmed for Hitler's entertainment. Entire families were arrested. Wives, children, elderly parents. The Nazi principle of Sippenhaft, blood guilt, condemned the conspirators' relatives. Many were sent to concentration camps. Some survived the war, many didn't, and the war itself. It continued for 9 more months. From July 1944 to May 1945, millions more died. The Holocaust accelerated. The Eastern Front became a meat grinder. German cities were bombed into rubble. If Stauffenberg had succeeded, if the briefcase hadn't been moved, if the meeting had stayed in the bunker, if they'd used both bombs, the war might have ended in the summer of 1944. Millions of lives could have been saved. The Holocaust might have been stopped months earlier. But history doesn't deal in what-ifs. It deals in what happened. And what happened was this: a wooden table leg, 2 meters, 10 seconds. That's all that separated Hitler from death. Today, there is a memorial in Berlin, in the courtyard of the Bendler block, where Stauffenberg was executed. A plaque honors the conspirators of July 20th. For decades after the war, they were controversial figures in Germany. Were they heroes or traitors? They had sworn an oath to Hitler. They had served in his military. Some had fought in his wars, but they chose to break that oath. They chose to resist, even when it meant certain death. Over time, the verdict of history became clear. They were heroes, because they stood up when everyone else looked away, because they acted when action seemed impossible. Stauffenberg knew he would probably die. He knew the odds of success were slim, but he tried anyway, because some things are worth dying for: freedom, justice, humanity. The July 20th plot failed, but it proved something important. Even in the heart of darkness, even in the center of evil, there were Germans who resisted, who fought back, who said no, and that matters. Every year on July 20th, Germany remembers. Ceremonies are held, names are read: Stauffenberg, Beck, Ulbricht, Treschow, Bonhoeffer. Hundreds of names, thousands. People who chose conscience over loyalty, who chose death over complicity. The Nazis tried to erase them, to burn their bodies, to destroy their memory, but they failed, because heroes don't die. They echo. Closing, 30 seconds. July 20th, 1944. The day Adolf Hitler almost died. The day the world almost changed. 2 meters, 1 table leg, 10 seconds. That's all it took to alter the fate of millions. History is not inevitable. It hangs by a thread, and sometimes one man with 1 eye and 3 fingers can almost cut that thread. Almost. If you believe stories like this must never be forgotten, subscribe to the channel. Every story we tell is a memory preserved. Every voice we give back is a victory against silence.